The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the crystal glasses. Marcus Sterling, a man worth $3 billion, was red in the face, screaming at his assistants because the multi-million-dollar deal was crumbling before his eyes. The Italian delegation was standing up, insulted, ready to walk out the door and take their legacy with them. That's when the sound of a broken glass shattered the tension. Everyone looked at the waitress on her knees, but she didn't apologize. She looked up at the angry Italian patriarch and spoke, not in English, but in a flawless, aristocratic Sicilian dialect that no one in that room was supposed to know. The CEO froze. The waitress had just saved his life, but she had also just signed her own death warrant. The kitchen of the Obsidian, New York's most pretentious Michelin-starred restaurant, smelled of truffle oil, seared scallops, and anxiety. For Rose Hart, it smelled like exhaustion. Table 4 is waiting on their sparkling water, Hart. Do you want to be fired, or are you just naturally incompetent? Vanessa, the floor manager, snapped her fingers inches from Rose's face. Vanessa was 24, wore too much designer perfume, and had decided on her first day that Rose, a 32-year-old single mother with frayed cuffs on her uniform, was her personal punching bag. I'm going now, Vanessa, Rose said, her voice steady. She kept her head down. She had learned long ago that making eye contact with people like Vanessa only invited more venom. Rose balanced the silver tray with practiced ease, navigating the swinging doors out into the dining room. The transition was jarring. The kitchen was a war zone of shouting chefs and clattering pans. But the dining room was a sanctuary of hushed whispers and clinking silverware. It was dim, lit by amber sconces that cost more than Rose's rent for the year. She moved like a ghost. That was the job. Be invisible, refill the wine, clear the crumbs, disappear. Rose needed this job. Her daughter Lily had a severe asthma attack last week, and the medical bills were sitting on her kitchen counter like a ticking time bomb. $7,000. She had $84 in her bank account. She was taking double shifts, eating leftovers from the kitchen, and sleeping 4 hours a night. Don't screw this up tonight, Hart, Vanessa hissed, following her out to the floor. We have the VVIP booking in the private alcove. Rose froze for a fraction of a second. The name sent a chill down her spine, a ghost from a life she had buried 6 years ago. Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Vance Global, a shark in a bespoke suit. Did you hear me? Vanessa whispered aggressively. I heard you, Rose said, gripping the tray tighter. I'll stay out of the way. You better. Sterling is meeting with the Rossi family. They flew in from Palermo this morning. This is a buyout of the Rossi fashion empire. If a single drop of water lands on a suit, I will personally ensure you never work in this city again. Rose nodded and moved toward her section, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew the Rossi family, not personally, but she knew of them. Old money, traditional, dangerous if disrespected. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. The air grew heavier, the heavy oak doors swung open, and Marcus Sterling walked in. He looked exactly like he did on the magazine covers, perhaps even more imposing. He was tall, with sharp features and eyes that scanned the room like a predator, assessing threats. He wasn't handsome in a warm way. He was handsome in a way that suggested he owned everything he looked at. Following him was a nervous entourage of assistants and lawyers clutching briefcases, and then the Italians. Giovanni Rossi was a short, stout man in his 60s with a face carved from granite. He walked with a cane, not out of weakness, but as an accessory of power. Behind him was his son, Luca, who looked bored and dangerous. They were seated in the private alcove, a semi-secluded area separated by velvet ropes. Rose was assigned to the section adjacent to them, but because the Obsidian was short-staffed, Vanessa shoved a bottle of vintage Barolo into Rose's hands. The sommelier is busy with the senator at table 9, Vanessa whispered frantically. You open this for the Sterling table. Do not speak. Pour. Leave. Rose took the bottle. Her hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear of Marcus Sterling, but from the sheer exhaustion of working 14 days straight. She approached the table. The tension was already palpable. Marcus Sterling was smiling, but it was a tight, fake smile. He gestured to the empty chair next to him. My translator, Mr. Banks, should be here any second. Terrible traffic on Fifth Avenue. Giovanni Rossi stared at him blankly. He turned to his son Luca and muttered something in rapid low Italian. Rose, standing silently with the wine bottle, felt a jolt. She understood every word. Marcus, oblivious, kept smiling. Wine, this is a 1996 Barolo, very rare. Giovanni didn't look at the wine. He looked at his watch. Rose stepped forward, presenting the label to Marcus first, as was protocol. Marcus didn't even look at her. He waved his hand dismissively. Just pour it. As Rose carefully cut the foil, the doors to the restaurant burst open. A young man in a disheveled suit ran in, sweating profusely. It was the translator. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling, the accident on the bridge. The young man gasped, rushing to the table. Marcus's eyes flashed with cold fury. Sit down, Banks. You're 20 minutes late. You're costing me millions by the minute. Banks, flustered and terrified, sat down. He pulled out a notepad, his hands shaking. Tell Mr. Rossi, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a commanding baritone, that Sterling Vance respects the heritage of his company, and our acquisition offer is not just about money, but about taking the Rossi name global. Banks nodded and turned to Giovanni. He began to speak in Italian. Rose, pouring the wine into Giovanni's glass, paused. Banks was speaking Italian, yes, but it was textbook Italian. Clunky, academic, and worst of all, he was using the wrong register. He was speaking to Giovanni Rossi, a man of immense traditional pride, using the informal tu instead of the formal lei, and he was butchering the pronunciation. It was the linguistic equivalent of slapping the old man in the face. Giovanni's eyes narrowed. He said nothing. He simply picked up his water glass, took a sip, and spat it back into the glass. The table went silent. The silence that followed Giovanni's action was heavy enough to crush bones. Marcus Sterling's smile faltered. He looked at Banks. What did he say? What's happening? Banks was pale. I think he's just cleansing his palate, sir. He just spat water out, you idiot, Marcus hissed under his breath. Translate the offer now. Tell him $50 million up front, stock options, and he keeps a seat on the board. Banks cleared his throat and tried again. Signor Rossi. Rose bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted copper. Banks had just translated seat on the board, literally as sit on the chair. It sounded like he was offering the old man a place to rest his tired legs, like he was an invalid. Giovanni Rossi slammed his hand on the table. The cutlery jumped. Basta, Giovanni barked. He stood up, unleashing a torrent of angry Sicilian. Marcus looked panic-stricken. Banks, what is he saying? Banks was paralyzed. He says he's unhappy. He says something about a Spanish cow. A Spanish cow? Marcus stood up, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson. What the hell are you talking about? Giovanni signaled to his son. Luca and... No, wait. Marcus stepped in front of Giovanni, desperate. Please, Mr. Rossi, there is a misunderstanding. We can double the stock options. Marcus looked at Banks. Translate that. Double the stock. Banks opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He was hyperventilating. The pressure of the room, the terrifying glare of the Italian patriarch, and the rage of the billionaire CEO had broken him. Get out of my way, Luca Rossi said in heavily accented English, shoving Marcus aside lightly. This deal is dead. Marcus snarled, turning his fury on Banks. You are fired. Get out of my sight before I kill you. Banks scrambled away, knocking over his chair. The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were watching. Vanessa, the manager, was standing in the corner, looking terrified, knowing that if this table walked out, the owner would blame her. Giovanni Rossi adjusted his suit jacket, looking at Marcus with pure disdain. He spoke one last time in English, struggling with the words, You hire boys. You have no honor. Rossi brand is history. You buy nothing. He turned to leave. Rose was standing by the service station, clutching a tray of dirty napkins. She knew she should stay silent. She knew the rule. Be invisible. If she spoke, she would be fired. Vanessa would make sure she never worked again. She would lose the apartment. Lily wouldn't get her medication. But she looked at Giovanni Rossi. She saw the pride in his eyes, a pride that masked a deep sadness. The Rossi brand was bankrupt. She had read the financial reports in the discarded newspapers the diners left behind. Giovanni needed this deal, but he couldn't accept it from a man who disrespected him. If he walked out now, his family legacy would be sold off in pieces by the banks. Two lives were being ruined in this room: Marcus Sterling's reputation and Giovanni Rossi's legacy. Rose took a breath. It was a risk that could destroy her life. Signor Rossi, her voice rang out. It wasn't the soft, submissive voice of a waitress. It was clear, resonant, and commanding. The entire room froze. Marcus whipped his head around, his eyes bulging with rage. Vanessa started sprinting toward her. Hart, shut your mouth and get back to the... Rose ignored them. She looked directly at Giovanni, locking eyes with him. Chiedo scusa per l'interruzione, Don Giovanni, she said. Her Italian was perfect, but it wasn't just Italian. She slipped effortlessly into the specific Sicilian dialect of Palermo. The cadence melodic and respectful, the vowels rounded in the way only a native or a genius could master. I apologize for the interruption. The man who spoke to you understands neither the language of the heart nor of honor. But Mr. Sterling did not mean to insult you. His ignorance is the fault of his employees, not his soul. He knows the name Rossi is sacred. Giovanni stopped. He turned slowly, his cane tapping on the floor. He looked at Rose, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the cheap uniform, the stained apron, the loose strand of hair falling on her face. But he heard the voice of home. Tu sei di Palermo? Giovanni asked, his voice soft, suspicious. No, signore, Rose replied, keeping her gaze lowered respectfully. No, sir, but I lived among your hills, and I know the value of your wine. Do not let a wrong translation destroy an empire built in 100 years. Silence. Marcus Sterling was staring at Rose as if she had just grown wings. He had no idea what she had said, but he saw the effect. Giovanni's shoulders dropped. The rage evaporated, replaced by curiosity. Vanessa had reached Rose's side, grabbing her arm hard, her nails digging into Rose's skin. I am so sorry, Mr. Sterling, Vanessa squeaked, trembling. This waitress is mentally unstable. I will have her removed immediately. Security. Let go of her, Marcus said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the force of a bullet. Vanessa froze. Sir? I said, let go of her arm, Marcus said, not taking his eyes off Giovanni. Giovanni looked at Marcus, then at Rose. He gestured to the empty chair where the fire translator had sat. Sediti, Giovanni said to Rose. Sit down. Rose hesitated. Sir, I have tables to serve. My manager... Giovanni looked at Marcus. If she does not translate, we leave. Marcus turned to Rose. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate intensity. He looked at the woman he had ignored 5 minutes ago, the woman whose existence meant less to him than the napkins on the table. Sit down, Marcus ordered, though his tone was pleading. Please. Rose placed her silver tray on the service station. She untied her dirty apron, revealing the simple black dress underneath. She smoothed her hair back. As she sat down at the table, surrounded by billions of dollars of power, she wasn't a waitress anymore. Her posture shifted. Her spine straightened. She crossed her legs and placed her hands on the table with an elegance that matched the Rossi family perfectly. Tell him, Marcus said, his voice, that I am offering $60 million, and total creative control stays with Luca. Rose turned to Giovanni. She didn't just translate words. She translated intent. She softened the blow, added the necessary honorifics, and framed the offer as a partnership of equals rather than a hostile takeover. The negotiation lasted 2 hours. By the time the dessert arrived, Giovanni was laughing. He was charmed. He treated Rose not as a servant, but as a granddaughter. When the contracts were finally signed, Giovanni kissed Rose's hand. Orisamirpu, he whispered. You saved more than a deal tonight, my child. The Italians left in high spirits. Marcus Sterling sat back in his chair, exhaling a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a year. He had secured the deal of the decade. He turned to look at Rose. She was tired. The adrenaline was fading, and the reality of her life was crashing back in. She stood up to leave. Where are you going? Marcus asked. My shift isn't over, Mr. Sterling. I have to clean the station. You're not cleaning anything, Marcus said, studying her face. Who are you? A waitress at the Obsidian doesn't speak Sicilian dialect and understand international contract law. Rose grabbed her apron. I'm just a waitress who reads a lot, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me, Vanessa's going to write me up for being out of my section. What is your name? Rose Hart. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Hart? That's not an Italian name. I told you I'm not Italian. Then how? Google Translate is getting better every year. She lied smoothly, turning to walk away. Marcus watched her go. He didn't believe her for a second. He pulled out his phone and dialed his head of security, a man named Roach, who could find dirt on a saint. Roach, Marcus said, watching Rose disappear into the kitchen. I need a background check. Rose Hart, waitress at the Obsidian, deep dive. I want to know where she was born, who she married, and why a woman with the negotiation skills of a diplomat is serving pasta for minimum wage. Marcus paused, his eyes cold. Something tells me she's hiding something big, and I don't like secrets. The kitchen doors swung shut behind Rose, cutting off the soft jazz and the scent of expensive cologne. She was back in the heat, the noise and the smell of dishwater. She hadn't even made it to the sink before Vanessa was on her. Who do you think you are? Vanessa screamed, her face contorted with jealousy. You humiliated me. You humiliated this restaurant. Rose didn't flinch. She was too tired. I saved the deal, Vanessa. Mr. Sterling asked me to translate. Mr. Sterling is a guest. You are a servant. Vanessa grabbed the apron Rose was holding. You think because a billionaire smiled at you, you're special? You're nothing. You're a high school dropout with a sick kid and a bad attitude. The mention of Lily made Rose's blood run cold. She stepped forward, her eyes darkening. Don't bring my daughter into this. I'll do whatever I want, Vanessa sneered. Because you're fired. Get out now. Rose felt the floor drop out from under her. Vanessa, please. I have rent due in 2 days. The medical bills? Not my problem. Hand over your badge. If you're not out of the building in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police for trespassing. Rose looked around the kitchen. The chefs, the dishwashers, people she had helped, people she had covered shifts for, all looked away. Nobody wanted to cross Vanessa. In the service industry, you were disposable. Rose handed over her badge. Her hands were shaking, not from anger anymore, but from pure terror. Without this paycheck, she couldn't buy Lily's inhalers. She walked out the back door into the alleyway. It was raining, a cold, miserable New York drizzle that soaked through her thin dress instantly. She leaned against the brick wall, sliding down until she hit the wet pavement and buried her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford the luxury of crying. She had to think. She needed a new job tonight. Maybe the 24-hour diner in Queens was hiring. A pair of headlights swept across the alley, blinding her. A sleek black Maybach purred to a stop right in front of the dumpsters. The back window rolled down. Get in, a voice commanded. Rose shielded her eyes. It was Marcus Sterling. I'm wet, sir. I'll ruin the leather, Rose said, standing up, her pride kicking in. She wouldn't be a charity case. I can buy new leather. Get in the car, Rose. She hesitated, then opened the door. The warmth of the car hit her like a physical blow. She sat on the edge of the seat, dripping water onto the pristine floor mats. Marcus was typing on his phone. He didn't look up. I saw your manager fire you. She has a loud voice, hard to miss. I could have stopped her, Marcus said, finally looking at her. His eyes were gray, intelligent, and unreadable. Why didn't you? Because I need you desperate, Marcus said coldly. If you still had a job, you might say no to what I'm about to offer. But now you have no choice. Rose stiffened. I don't do private favors, Mr. Sterling. If that's what this is, let me out. Marcus laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I don't want you in my bed, Miss Hart. I can get a supermodel for that. I want your brain. He tapped the glass partition, and the driver began to move. Where are we going? Rose asked. To my office. We need to talk about your salary. My salary for what? For being my personal interpreter and strategic consultant for the duration of the Rossi merger. It will take 2 weeks. The Italians don't trust me, but they trust you. They think you're a charming peasant girl with a good heart. I need you to maintain that illusion. Rose looked out the window at the blurring city lights. And what do I get? Marcus pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket. He scribbled a number and tore it out, holding it between 2 fingers. This is a retainer. $10,000 plus $2,000 a day for 2 weeks. Rose stared at the check. It was more money than she made in 6 months. It was Lily's medicine. It was rent. It was safety. There's a catch, Rose said softly. There's always a catch with men like you. The catch, Marcus said, his voice dropping, is that I own you for 2 weeks. You are on call 24/7. You wear what I tell you. You say what I tell you. And you tell me the truth about who you really are. Rose's heart skipped a beat. I told you I'm Rose Hart. We'll see, Marcus said, putting the check on her wet knee. Welcome to Sterling Vance, Rose. The Sterling Vance Tower was a monolith of glass and steel that pierced the Manhattan skyline. The elevator ride to the penthouse office took 40 seconds, enough time for Rose to dry her face and compose herself. When the doors opened, she wasn't stepping into an office. She was stepping into a fortress. The walls were lined with modern art that cost millions. The floor was marble. But what caught Rose's eye wasn't the luxury. It was the chessboard. In the center of the room, on a low mahogany table, sat an antique ivory and ebony chess set. The pieces were arranged in mid-game. It looked like a complex, aggressive position. Make yourself comfortable, Marcus said, throwing his jacket onto a sofa. I need to sign some papers in the other room. Then we'll go over the Rossi files. He disappeared into an adjoining study. Rose stood alone in the massive room. She shouldn't touch anything. She should sit quietly and be the good employee. But the chessboard pulled at her like a magnet. It was an addiction she hadn't indulged in 6 years, not since the life she left behind. She walked over to the board. White to move. She analyzed the position instantly. It was a mess. White was under heavy attack on the king's side. Most players would play defensive, moving the rook to f2. It was the safe, logical move. But Rose saw something else. She saw a sacrifice. If White sacrificed the queen, it opened a diagonal for the bishop. It wasn't just a save. It was a forced mate in 4 moves. It was brilliant. It was violent. It was beautiful. Without thinking, her hand reached out. She picked up the white queen and captured the black pawn, leaving the queen wide open to be taken. She heard a gasp behind her. She spun around. It wasn't Marcus. It was a man she hadn't seen before. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. He wore a tactical vest over a black t-shirt, and he had a scar running through his left eyebrow. This was Roach, the head of security. You got a death wish? Roach asked, his voice gravelly. Nobody touches the boss's board. He's been staring at that position for 3 days. Before Rose could apologize, Marcus walked back in. He stopped dead. He looked at the board. Who moved the queen? Marcus demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I did, Rose said, lifting her chin. It was in the way. In the way? Marcus stormed over to the board. You just sacrificed my queen to a knight. You lost me the game. Look again, Rose said. Marcus glared at her, then looked down at the board. He reached for the black knight to take the queen, playing out the opponent's move in his head. Then he stopped. His hand hovered. He saw it. If black took the queen, the bishop swept in. Check. The king moves, the rook slides over. Checkmate. Marcus stood frozen for a long time. The silence in the room was deafening. Roach was watching with wide eyes. He had never seen anyone shut Marcus up like this. Slowly, Marcus looked up at Rose. The look on his face had changed. The arrogance was fractured, replaced by a deep, unsettling suspicion. Who taught you to play? Marcus asked. My father, Rose lied. He played into the park. That is a grandmaster level combination, Marcus said, stepping closer to her. He was too close now. She could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. Waitresses don't speak aristocratic Sicilian dialect. Waitresses don't negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts. And waitresses certainly don't find a mate in 4 that I missed. He circled her like a shark. Roach, Marcus said, not breaking eye contact with Rose. What did you find? Roach stepped forward, opening a folder. That's the thing, boss. I found nothing. Rose held her breath. Rose Hart didn't exist before 2019, Roach read from the file. Social Security number was issued 5 years ago. No birth certificate in the state archives. No high school records. No driver's license history before then. Roach looked at Rose. It's a ghost ID, a good one. Professional, but it's fake. Marcus stopped in front of her. So you're not Rose Hart. You have a fake name, a fake history, and a very real talent for strategy. He leaned in, his voice a whisper. Are you a corporate spy sent by Vance to sabotage me? Or maybe the Chinese delegation sent you? Rose laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. I'm a single mother who needs money for asthma medicine. That's the only truth that matters, Mr. Sterling. If I was a spy, I wouldn't be working for tips. Marcus studied her face. He was looking for a lie, but he saw the genuine fear in her eyes when she mentioned her daughter. We have a problem, Rose, or whatever your name is, Marcus said. I can't have a ghost negotiating for my company. I need to know who I'm getting into bed with, metaphorically. You don't need to know my past to use my skills, Rose countered. You saw what I did with the Rossies. You saw the board. You need me. I do, Marcus admitted, but I don't like mysteries. He walked back to his desk and pressed a button. The heavy curtains slid open, revealing the city below. Tomorrow night is the Sterling Gala. The Rossi family will be there. You will attend as my date and my interpreter. You will wear the dress I send you. You will charm them, and you will secure the final signature. And if I do, then I give you $50,000 cash untraceable, enough to take care of your daughter for a long time. Rose's heart pounded. 50,000. That was freedom. And if I fail, then I give Roach the green light to dig deeper, Marcus said, turning to face her. And Roach always finds what he's looking for. If you're running from the law or a husband or a past life, he will drag it into the light. Rose swallowed hard. Deal, Rose said. Good, Marcus smiled. It was a wolf's smile. Be ready at 7 o'clock p.m. And Rose, don't try to run. Roach will be watching your apartment. Rose turned and walked toward the elevator. She felt the weight of their eyes on her back. She had entered the lion's den and she had just agreed to let the lion play with her. As the elevator doors closed, she slumped against the metal wall. She pulled her phone out and looked at her screensaver. It was a picture of Lily. Just one more week, baby, she whispered. Then we disappear again. But deep down, Rose knew that disappearing from Marcus Sterling was going to be the hardest game of chess she had ever played. The dress box sat on Rose's chipped Formica kitchen table like an alien artifact. It was stamped with the gold foil logo of Oscar de la Renta. Rose stared at it while her 4-year-old daughter Lily played with a plastic dinosaur on the floor. Lily coughed, a dry, rattling sound that made Rose's stomach clench. Mommy, are you going to be a princess? Lily asked, looking up with wide-eyed eyes. Just for tonight, baby, Rose said, forcing a smile. She opened the box. Inside lay a gown of emerald silk chiffon, custom fitted. Beside it was a jewelry case containing a diamond choker that likely cost more than the entire apartment building Rose lived in. She touched the silk. It felt like her old life. It felt like Alexandra, the name she hadn't spoken in 6 years. Mrs. Higgins will be here in 10 minutes, Rose said, rushing to get changed. You be good, okay? If you feel tight in your chest, you tell her immediately. I know, Mommy. I'm big now. When Rose stepped out of the bathroom 30 minutes later, she wasn't Rose the waitress anymore. The dress draped over her body like liquid emeralds, accentuating a figure honed by hard work and resilience. Her hair, usually tied in a messy bun, cascaded in dark, glossy waves over one shoulder. The diamond choker caught the dim light of the kitchen bulb and shattered it into 1,000 rainbows. She looked expensive, dangerous, regal. A honk from the street signaled her carriage. She kissed Lily goodbye, her heart aching as she left her child in the care of the elderly neighbor and ran down the stairs. The black limousine was waiting. Roach opened the door and for the first time, the stoic security guard looked surprised. He blinked twice before nodding respectfully. Ms. Hart. Inside, Marcus Sterling was waiting. He was wearing a tuxedo that was cut to perfection, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up as she slid into the seat, and the glass paused halfway to his mouth. He didn't say anything for a long moment. His eyes traveled from her heels to her eyes, analyzing her not as an employee, but as a woman. You clean up well, Rose, he said, his voice dropping an octave. It's the dress, Mr. Sterling. Don't confuse the packaging with the product. I never do, Marcus replied, handing her a glass of champagne. Tonight is war. The Rossi family is wavering. A competitor, Julian Thorne, has been whispering in Giovanni's ear all afternoon. Thorne wants the Rossi brand for his conglomerate. If we lose the Rossis tonight, the merger is dead. And what do you need me to do? Be the distraction, Marcus said. Thorne is aggressive. He'll try to rattle me. I need you to keep Giovanni happy and keep Thorne away from me. You want me to run interference on a billionaire shark? You checkmated me in 4 moves, Rose. I think you can handle Julian Thorne. The car pulled up to the Plaza Hotel. The red carpet was a frenzy of flashbulbs and screaming paparazzi. Ready? Marcus asked, offering his arm. No, Rose said honestly. Good. Fear makes you sharp. The door opened. The noise hit them like a physical wave. Marcus, over here. Mr. Sterling, who is she? Who is the mystery woman? Rose stepped out, her chin held high. She adopted the mask she had worn for 26 years of her previous life. The cool, detached boredom of the elite. She didn't smile at the cameras. She looked through them. As they walked up the grand staircase, Marcus whispered, You walk like you own the pavement. Where did you learn that? Waitressing, she lied. It's all about balance. They entered the grand ballroom. It was a sea of tuxedos, designer gowns, and vicious gossip. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres, and that's when Rose saw her. Vanessa, her former manager, was there. The Obsidian was catering the VIP section. Vanessa was standing near the champagne fountain, barking orders at a terrified busboy. When Vanessa turned and saw Marcus Sterling, she put on her best sycophantic smile. Then her eyes shifted to the woman on his arm. Vanessa's jaw literally dropped. The tray of empty flutes she was holding slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. Crash. Heads turned. Vanessa stared at Rose. She looked at the emerald dress, the diamonds, the way Marcus's hand rested possessively on the small of her back. Rose stopped. She looked down at Vanessa, who was now on her knees picking up glass, her face flushed with humiliation and confusion. Careful, Vanessa, Rose said, her voice cool and projecting perfectly over the hush. You wouldn't want to be fired for incompetence. I hear the job market is tough right now. Marcus squeezed Rose's arm, hiding a smirk. You know the help? She used to manage a restaurant I frequented, Rose said loud enough for the surrounding socialites to hear. Service was terrible. Vanessa went pale. Rose stepped over the broken glass, leaving her past in the dust, and moved toward the VIP table where the Rossi family waited. The dinner was a battlefield disguised as a banquet. Giovanni Rossi was charmed by Rose. She spoke to him in Sicilian about the olive groves of Palermo, about the history of the opera, about the tragedies of the old country. She made him laugh. She made him cry. She was weaving a spell that Marcus watched with awe, but the shark was circling. Julian Thorne approached the table just as the main course was cleared. Thorne was a handsome man in a reptilian way, slicked back blonde hair, teeth that were too white, and an aura of aggressive new money. Marcus Thorne, Thorne boomed, ignoring social boundaries. And Giovanni, buonasera. Thorne's Italian was decent, but it lacked the soul that Rose possessed. Julian, Marcus said, his muscles tightening. We're in the middle of dinner. I just wanted to say hello to the lovely lady, Thorne said, turning his predatory gaze to Rose. I don't believe we've met. I know everyone in New York worth knowing, and I don't know you, which makes you very intriguing. Rose Hart, she said, extending a hand, but not rising. I'm a consultant for Sterling Vance. A consultant? Thorne laughed. Is that what we're calling it these days? Tell me, Marcus, does she consult on your portfolio or your nightlife? It was a crude, disgusting insult. Giovanni Rossi frowned. The traditional Italian hated disrespect toward women. Marcus stood up. Careful, Julian. Relax, Marcus. I'm just jealous. You always have the prettiest toys. Thorne grinned. But let's get to business. I hear the Rossi deal is stalling. Maybe Giovanni is realizing that Sterling Vance is a sinking ship. I'm willing to offer 10% above whatever Marcus is paying. The table went silent. This was a hostile takeover attempt in the middle of a gala. Giovanni looked at Marcus, then at Thorne. He was a businessman, 10% was a lot of money. Marcus looked ready to punch Thorne, which would ruin everything. Rose cleared her throat. She took a sip of water and set the glass down with a sharp clink. Mr. Thorne, Rose said, it's interesting you mentioned sinking ships. Isn't your company, Thorne Capital, currently under investigation by the SEC for the liquidity crisis in your Asian markets? Thorne's smile vanished. Excuse me? I read the Financial Times, Rose said innocently. And if I recall, your debt-to-equity ratio is currently sitting at a dangerous 4.5. If you buy Rossi, you'll be leveraging assets you don't actually have. You're not offering Giovanni 10% more. You're offering him a ticket on the Titanic. Thorne's eyes narrowed into slits. You're a smart little thing, aren't you? But you're wrong. My liquidity is fine. In fact, I'm so liquid, I'll make a wager right now. Thorne snapped his fingers. A waiter appeared. There is a chess set in the library lounge, Thorne said loudly, drawing the attention of nearby tables. Marcus tells me he plays. I play. I was the captain of the Yale team. Thorne looked at Giovanni. A game of chess. If I win, Giovanni agrees to a meeting with me tomorrow morning to hear my counteroffer. If Marcus wins, I walk away and publicly endorse the Sterling-Vance merger. It was insane. It was theatrical. And it was exactly the kind of spectacle these bored billionaires loved. I don't play games with my business, Marcus said stiffly. Are you scared, Sterling? Thorne goaded. Giovanni, do you want to sell your legacy to a coward? Giovanni looked at Marcus. I like chess. It shows the character of a man. Play him, Marcus. Marcus was trapped. He was a good player, decent even, but he wasn't Yale captain level. He looked at Rose. Panic flared in his eyes. I accept, Marcus said through gritted teeth. The crowd moved to the library lounge. A beautiful marble board was set up. Cameras were filming. The game began. Thorne played aggressive, fast. He used the king's gambit, a risky, violent opening. Marcus played defensively, sweating under the collar. By move 15, Marcus was in trouble. Thorne had pinned Marcus's knight and was threatening his queen. Rose stood behind Marcus' chair, watching the board. She saw the trap. Thorne was baiting Marcus into a trade that would lose him the game in 10 moves. Marcus reached for his rook. It was the wrong move. If he moved the rook, he died. Rose dropped her clutch bag. It hit the floor with a loud thud. Marcus jumped and looked back. Oops, Rose whispered. As she bent down to pick it up near his ear, she whispered 3 words. Sacrifice the bishop. Marcus froze. He looked at the board. Sacrifice the bishop. It seemed suicidal. It left his king open. But he remembered the office. He remembered the mate and 4 she had seen that he missed. He looked at Rose. Her eyes were fierce, demanding trust. Marcus took a breath. He picked up his bishop and slammed it into Thorne's pawn wall. Check. Thorne laughed. Desperation move, Marcus. I take the bishop and you're open. Thorne took the piece, but the board had changed. The diagonal was open. Marcus saw the line now. It was like a fog lifting. He moved his queen. Check. Thorne moved his king. Marcus brought the knight in. Check. Thorne stopped laughing. He stared at the board. The color drained from his face. He looked at the position, tracing the lines. There was no escape. Checkmate in 2, Marcus said, his voice ringing with confidence he didn't feel seconds ago. Thorne knocked his king over in fury. Impossible. You cheated. I just played the game, Julian, Marcus said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Now get out of here and keep your word about the endorsement. The room erupted in applause. Giovanni Rossi was clapping the loudest. Bravo, bravo, a man who fights with courage. Marcus turned to Rose. The adrenaline was coursing through him. He grabbed her hand and pulled her close, kissing her on the cheek for the cameras. You are incredible, he whispered in her ear. You just made me $50 million. Rose smiled, but her heart was hammering. She had exposed her tactical mind to a room full of sharks. As the crowd began to disperse, a man stepped out from the shadows of a bookshelf. He was older, with silver hair and a monocle, an affectation, but a terrifying one. He was Arthur Pendleton, the most notorious society gossip columnist in New York. He had known everyone who was anyone for 40 years. He walked up to Rose, squinting his eyes. Extraordinary game, Pendleton croaked. He leaned in closer to Rose, invading her personal space. You have a very specific style of strategy, my dear. Aggressive, sacrificial. It reminds me of a young debutante I knew years ago. A prodigy. Rose's blood turned to ice. She tried to turn away. I'm just a consultant, Mr. Pendleton. Are you? Pendleton tilted his head. Because you look remarkably like Alexandra Vance, the daughter of Victor Vance, The girl who disappeared 6 years ago after the scandal. Marcus froze. He looked at Pendleton, then at Rose. Vance, Marcus repeated. As in my partner's family, the family that founded half of my company. Pendleton smiled, a cruel, thin smile. Oh, you didn't know, Marcus. You're employing the runaway, the girl who supposedly died in a boating accident in Capri? Rose stepped back, her breath hitching. The room seemed to spin. Is it true? Marcus asked, his voice low, the betrayal already creeping in. Are you Alexandra Vance? Rose looked at him. She saw the confusion turning into anger. She saw Roach moving toward them. I have to go, Rose stammered. She turned and ran. Rose, stop, Marcus shouted. But she didn't stop. She gathered up her emerald skirts and sprinted through the ballroom, past the stunned Rossies, past the smirking Thorne, and out into the cool night air. She had won the game, but she had just knocked over her own king. Rose didn't wait for the valet. She kicked off her heels and ran barefoot down Fifth Avenue, the cold pavement biting into her skin. The rain had started again, washing away the hairspray and the makeup, stripping away the Alexandra Vance mask and leaving just Rose, the desperate mother, running home to her child. She heard the roar of an engine behind her. The black Maybach swerved to the curb, cutting off her path. Marcus leaped out of the car, ignoring the rain soaking his tuxedo. He moved faster than she expected, grabbing her arm before she could turn down a side street. Let me go, she screamed, struggling against his grip. I quit. You can't fire me. I quit. You don't get to run this time, Alexandra, Marcus shouted over the sound of the traffic. You've been dead for 6 years. My company, our company, mourned you. Your father has a shrine to you in the boardroom. Why? Don't speak his name. Rose's voice broke, raw and painful. She stopped fighting and looked up at him, water streaming down her face. Victor Vance isn't a grieving father. He's a monster. Marcus loosened his grip slightly, stunned by the venom in her voice. Explain now. You want the truth? Rose shivered. 6 years ago, I fell in love with a jazz musician, a nobody. My father, he didn't approve. He arranged a marriage for me, a business merger, basically. When I refused, he threatened to destroy the man I loved. He threatened to have him killed. She took a shaky breath. So I ran. We took a boat in Capri. We staged the accident. But my boyfriend, he didn't make it. He drowned for real. I survived. I was pregnant with Lily. I came back to New York, changed my name, and hid in the one place Victor Vance would never look. The working class. Marcus stared at her. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. He saw the truth in her eyes. The years of fear, the sacrifice, the fierce protection of her daughter. You gave up $1 billion inheritance to wait tables, Marcus said softly, to keep your daughter safe. I would give up the world for her, Rose whispered. Now let me go, Marcus. If Pendleton writes that story, my father will find us. He'll take Lily. He has the lawyers, the judges. I can't fight him. You're right, Marcus said. He stepped closer, shielding her from the wind with his body. You can't fight him alone. Rose looked at him, confused. What? You signed a contract, Rose. You're my consultant. That means you're under my protection. Marcus reached out and gently wiped a raindrop from her cheek. Let Victor try to come for you. I have better lawyers. I have more money. And unlike him, I actually know how to play chess. Why would you help me? Rose asked, her voice trembling. I lied to you. You lied about your name? Marcus said. Or said, his eyes intense. But you didn't lie about who you are. The woman who stood up to Giovanni Rossi. The woman who sacrificed her bishop to win the game. That's the woman I want. I don't care about Alexandra Vance. I want Rose. He pulled her into him, and for the first time in 6 years, Rose didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she had landed. The boardroom of Sterling Vance was packed. The board members were murmuring, nervous. Victor Vance, an older, crueler version of the man Rose remembered, sat at the head of the table. He had heard the rumors. He was ready to crush the imposter. The doors opened. Marcus walked in, but he didn't walk to the head of the table. He pulled out the chair to his right, the seat reserved for the Vance heir, which had been empty for 6 years. Rose walked in. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She wasn't wearing a ball gown. She was wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit that screamed power. She walked with the grace of a queen and the grit of a survivor. She stood behind the chair and looked her father in the eye. "Hello, father," she said. Her voice didn't waver. Victor Vance turned purple. You, you ungrateful—" "I'm back," Rose interrupted, placing a stack of files on the table. "And I've been reviewing the company accounts. It seems you've been embezzling from the employee pension fund to cover your gambling debts in Macau." The room gasped. "I have the proof right here," Rose continued, tapping the files. "You can step down gracefully, retire to the Hamptons, and never speak to me or my granddaughter again, or Marcus and I can send these to the FBI." Victor looked at Marcus. Marcus just smiled, a cold, shark-like smile. Checkmate, Victor. The Obsidian was under new management. Rose had bought it. She walked into the kitchen holding Lily's hand. Lily was healthy, laughing, holding a new chess set. Vanessa was still there, but she wasn't a manager anymore. She was scrubbing the prep station. When she saw Rose, she flinched. "Good evening, Vanessa," Rose said pleasantly. "Table 4 needs water." Vanessa looked down, humbled. "Yes, Miss Vance, right away." Rose walked out to the dining room where Marcus was waiting at the corner table, the same table where it all began. He had a bottle of 1996 Barolo open. "How was your day, Madame CEO?" Marcus asked, standing to kiss her. "Productive," Rose smiled, sitting down. She picked up a white pawn from the chess set on the table and twirled it in her fingers. "But I'm ready for my real job." "And what's that?" "Beating you again," she grinned. Nobody in the restaurant knew that the couple in the corner controlled half the city's economy. Nobody knew the waitress was a queen. But as Rose looked at Marcus and then at her daughter playing nearby, she knew she had finally won the only game that mattered. And that is the incredible story of Rose, the waitress who silenced a room of billionaires and reclaimed her life. It just goes to show that you should never judge someone by their uniform. You never know who is hiding a brilliant mind or a secret past. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow so I can bring you more dramatic stories like this one. What would you do if you were in Rose's shoes? Would you have run away or stayed to fight? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. We have a crazy story coming up next week about a homeless man who was actually a secret billionaire. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. In the heart-wrenching tale of Rose Hart, a seemingly ordinary waitress who rises from the shadows of exhaustion and desperation to reclaim her throne as Alexandra Vance, we uncover a profound life lesson. Never underestimate the hidden depths within every soul you encounter. Rose's journey reminds us that beneath the frayed uniforms and weary smiles of everyday people lie untold stories of resilience, brilliance, and untapped potential. Imagine pouring your heart into a thankless job, scraping by to afford your child's medicine, only to discover that your past, a life of privilege tainted by a monstrous father, holds the key to unlocking a future of empowerment. It's a raw, emotional punch to the gut, showing how life's cruelties can forge unbreakable strength. In a world quick to judge by appearances, Rose teaches us the value of empathy and courage. She didn't just save a billion-dollar deal with her flawless Sicilian dialect and strategic genius. She saved herself by daring to speak up in a room full of power players who had dismissed her as invisible. This story tugs at our hearts because it's a mirror to our own struggles. Those moments when we feel small, overlooked, or trapped by circumstances. Yet, like Rosa Arfridem, sacrificing her queen on the chessboard for a triumphant checkmate, we learn that true victory often demands bold risks and vulnerability. It's a call to honor the waitresses in our lives, the unsung heroes whose wisdom could change everything if we only listen. Embrace this lesson, peel back the layers, for everyone carries a legacy waiting to bloom. If this emotional roller coaster moved you, smash that like button to spread the inspiration. It fuels more stories like this. What would you do in Rose's shoes? Run from your past or fight for your future? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing your perspectives. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another tale of triumph, justice, and sweet revenge. We've got an epic story about a secret billionaire next week. You won't want to miss it.